A long time ago, in a dank, dark pool somewhere inside the Swamp of Sorrows, a most peculiar Murloc was born. Murlocs are themselves peculiar creatures, but this one was especially odd. You see, Murlocs are not known for their intelligence, more likely to attack what they see as a threat or their next meal, regardless of consequence. Yet this Murloc was as cunning as a fox, and more curious still, had a mind for numbers. Murlocs, though loud, are not the best public speakers, their grunts and gargles simplistic and crude, even to their own kind. Yet this Murloc spoke common most fluent, superior even to that of your average human. Murlocs are also not known for their fashion sense, any clothing they wear usually being accidental, torn from their victims with no particular rhyme or reason. Yet this Murloc found the naked nature of the rest of his kind embarrassing, and through pilfering and the occasional cold-blooded murder, built himself quite the wardrobe, which he kept hidden from the rest of his tribe, in the bowels of a large, hollow tree. As unique and evolved as this Murloc was, he was rejected by his tribe for his bizarre mannerisms, claiming that he didn't like them anyway and hoped they all got camped by gold farmers, set out to seek his fortune. This lasted around half an hour, for on his way out of the swamp he was set upon by a crocolisk, who bit off his legs. He blacked out, and upon waking up discovered he had been taken in by a kindly priest, who had nursed him back to health, bandaged up the remains of his ravaged legs, and constructed for him a crude chair with wheels. As thanks for this generous act, the Murloc killed him and ate him while he slept. For you see, the Murloc has no concept of human morality, ethics, or a conscience. Driven by determination and single-minded spite, the Murloc travelled for many days until he reached the town of Booty Bay. Disguising himself as a poor beggar, he made a small fortune through cunning panhandling before manipulating the goblin markets to acquire vast swathes of wealth. By the time the goblins had realized what was going on, the Murloc was beyond reproach, having purchased a mansion high up in the Stranglethorn Hills and his own personal security force of Bloodsail buccaneers to ensure the goblins who he'd relieved of much of their assets would never come knocking again. As time went on, the Murloc acquired an almost mythical status among the townsfolk. They heard rumours of a creature so cunning and wise that he had tricked even the scheming goblins into giving up their wealth, a being so determined that he had crawled out of the swamp after battling both man and beast and built himself a kingdom in the hills. The humans of Booty Bay and the surrounding Stranglethorn villages had no love for the goblins and their sleazy cartels, who lived lavish lives at their expense and had no trouble imagining the Murloc as some kind of folk hero, an aquatic Robin Hood. They were naturally mistaken, for the Murloc cares about no one but himself. Nevertheless, this did not stop the villagers from making the long and dangerous trek to his mansion to seek his wisdom. The Murloc indulged them, finding their attentions a balm for his ego, but his short temper and utter intolerance for other forms of life soon got the better of him, and he took great pleasure in feeding the slower, weaker villagers to his pack of rabid dogs, or luring them into various traps and pitfalls. Despite this sadistic behaviour, humans are in general incredibly stupid and slow to catch on, so the villagers continued to make the journey to the gate of the mansion, and the Murloc continued to indulge them, as long as they amused him and fulfilled his little fancies. Things were going so well, but as they so often do, took a turn for the worse on a cold winter morning. It seems the Murloc was not the only one of his kind, and this became very apparent when a knock on his door revealed a short, wrinkled creature wearing a large fur coat and hat, leaning heavily on a walking stick. She introduced herself only as grandmother and informed the Murloc of a most curious turn of events. She too was far more intelligent than her kind, and part of a small tribe of Winterspring Murlocs. She had come to dominate that particular group as their elder, and long ago had banished her son, who had attempted to lead a rebellion against her increasingly tyrannical regime, to the Swamp of Sorrows. Many years later, and the truth was finally revealed, the Murloc was the offspring of the exiled mutineer. Grandmother informed the Murloc in no uncertain terms that she did not like him and would have nothing to do with him, but that if he wanted to continue living his hedonistic life, he would do everything she asked of him, or she would, quote, kill him horribly. As the Murloc began to mock her seemingly empty threats, she struck her walking stick on the marble floor, and several dwarves with rather big guns burst through the door of the billiard room, barrels pointed squarely, and with ill intent, at the Murloc's head. Cackling to herself, Grandma then left, leaving the Murloc nursing a large glass of scotch and a thundering headache. Time passed, and were it not for the presence of his now fortress-like security, the Murloc would have forgotten all about Grandmother, until, during his afternoon nap, the Murloc awoke to a most unwelcome sight. Standing before him, clad in heavy furs and wearing a large hat, was the biggest Murloc he'd ever seen. The intruder grinned broadly and slapped the Murloc on the shoulder, promptly knocking him out of his seat and halfway across the room. The new arrival introduced himself as the Soviet Murloc from Winterspring Country, and that he was the Murloc's distant cousin. He presented the Murloc with a note stating, "Please take care of your cousin for me, or I will kill you horribly. Grandmother." Groaning, half from the inevitable realization and half from mild concussion, the Murloc grudgingly accepted this duty, wholly due to having no choice in the matter. As his servants helped him up, he heard a creaking sound and the unpleasant crack of splintering timber. It had transpired, not being particularly bright and unfamiliar with the rigors of civilized society, the Soviet Murloc had, opposed to entering through the door, simply bashed his way through the ill-maintained and ancient walls of the mansion. With the thunderous and terrible sound of a tsunami, the mansion collapsed, and all was darkness. The Murloc awoke buried in rubble. Screaming for help, he found himself picked up and hoisted in a most undignified manner onto the side of the driveway. He looked despairingly upon the ruins of his once majestic mansion and tried to take a swing at the towering figure who'd caused such destruction. All he succeeded in doing was bruising his knuckles. The Soviet Murloc seemed genuinely upset about the whole affair, apologizing profusely, meek and easily confused, despite his powerful, muscular physique. He informed the Murloc that he was only doing as he was told, and he had a plan to make things right. He told the Murloc of a powerful, valuable artifact known as the Cup of Moon Silver, which is said to grant wealth and power beyond one's wildest dreams, if only someone could find and claim it for themselves. He suggested they go in search of such an item, and that the Murloc could rebuild his mansion twice as large and twice as majestic, were they to recover it. The Murloc agreed, driven by avarice, greed, and all those other wholesome motivations, as well as the rather more pressing matter that he had squandered his vast fortune on unnecessary security, due to his growing paranoia after the visit of Grandmother all those years ago. They set off on what could only be described as an epic quest, a tale of many episodes that spanned Azeroth and beyond. There were many cameos, in-jokes, references, plot holes, and other things which have no place in an accomplished work of fiction, and eventually they reached their goal. Upon discovering that the entire journey was engineered by Grandmother to get her filthy flippers on the artifact for herself, the Murloc, in a rare display of courage, met Grandmother head-on and triumphed, returning to his home with untold wealth and his cousin in tow. Truth be told, after his mansion was rebuilt, the Murloc pushed the Soviet Murloc down a well, having grown tired of his foolishness, and he was never heard from again. And so, here we are. Many years on, the Murloc resumes his favourite hobby, tormenting the villagers by pretending to give sagely advice. Humans are, after all, incredibly stupid. So begins another chapter of the feature known only as Ask the Murloc. Ask the Murloc. No, a bit to the left. Good lord, are you 7 different shades of stupid? Aim at the one in the dress. No, you blundering fool, the frail-looking one. Yes, that's it. Now, fire some missiles. Ah, wonderful. I do love the smell of charred flesh in the morning. Oh, it's you. Didn't I tell you to go jump off a cliff? What do you mean you didn't? How dare you claim it wasn't good advice? I should have fed you to the crocolisk for this. I suppose, however, since you're here and the crocolisks are a little sluggish this early in the evening, I can grace you with my infinite wisdom. Well, spit it out, you insolent peasants. Are you all mute or something? Oh, you are. Well, that's incredibly inconvenient for me. What is this? A note?
You expect me to read your unearthly scrawl? Well, I should take it as a challenge. Far be it from me, the Murloc, to be defeated by a ragged bunch of festering whelps. Dear Murloc, we would like to speak to you, but since you didn't bother to tell anyone in advance that the feature would be returning, nobody emailed you. They can record their questions and email them to themurloc@gmail.com. But obviously they can't do that this week, and so we made up a bunch of questions for you to read out instead. Yours, in mortal terror, the villagers. You blithering idiots and your pitiful pea-sized brains! Have you been blessed with a Murloc's gift of foresight? You would have seen this coming and had your questions ready. Instead, you pass me notes like some petulant school children and expect me, the Murloc, to read them? Pathetic! There is not one iota of potential in the whole blasted lot of you. However, the Murloc can be merciful when it amuses him, so I shall read 2 of these notes of yours. No more, no less. Give them here, pass them over. Let's see. No. No! Preposterous! Pedantic! These are no good at all. Wait, what's this? A question worthy of my wisdom for a change. Dear Murloc, with the cataclysm fast approaching, could you please explain to me the background lore behind Tauren Paladins? Azerothian lore and history, my 2 personal favourite subjects. I can tell you, I take great pride in my vast knowledge of this area, okay? But I must be extremely strictus in who I give it out to. I wouldn't want to leto you on. Okay, admitted, which disgraceful excuse for a moron wrote this script? I've never ate such pun-peppered pizzle in all my years. You know what? To hell with it. We'll do it live. Yes, you heard me correctly. We'll do it live! Tauren Paladin lore goes deep back into the mists of time, where the great Tauren prophet Obi-Wan Kenobi introduced the Tauren people to the universe-spanning power of the light. When challenged by a young upstart known as Darth Maul, he stabbed him with his light saber, thus proving that the light not only existed, but could be contained within a sword, and was as such awesome. The Taurens thought this was kinda cool, and as such, began training to become paladins. Unfortunately, Taurens were so large that they were unable to fit inside a bubble, making them unable to use the paladin's only useful skill. It has taken until now for the Taurens to locate an alternative, which they finally did by manipulating space and time with the so-called Chris Metzen effect. When quizzed as to what this entailed, they replied it usually involved doing the backstroke in a vast vat of hallucinogenics. Now, what does this one say? Yes, I see it now. Dear Murloc, I am confused about the upcoming changes to stats. Can you please explain what the Cataclysm expansion is doing in this regard? Well, yes, I can, for the Murloc can do many, many things. In the Cataclysm expansion, Blizzard will be catering to the drooling pros and removing the more complex elements of the game, such as strength, agility, and stamina. Since they've spent so long trying to make you care about MP5, you will no longer have the choice in the matter. MP5 will replace all major stats and will determine how hard you hit, how many hits you can take, and how likely you are to get into an endgame raiding guild. Weapons too will be altered and their stats replaced with something new called How Cool Does This Look Quotient. The cooler the item looks, the more damage it will do. As a result, all Ulduar caster weapons will do the equivalent damage of a level 16 green spirit dagger, whereas the Turning Tide will be the best weapon in Cataclysm for both casters and Death Knights. Blizzard feels that this will address the issues the player base has been having with such complex tasks as breathing and putting one foot in front of the other. Now, before your puny brains detonate from the influx of wisdom, I shall express in no uncertain terms my desire for all of you to get out of my house! Jeeves, activate the automated perimeter offense cannons in 30 seconds, will you? She'll give them a sporting head start.
Ask the Murloc.